everyone, my name is Priya Bhitani. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar, we will be discussing the new IVD Act that went into effect in South Korea early this year. For those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, RegDesk is a regulatory software platform that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to make global compliance easier and faster. Our platform provides RA teams with comprehensive and updated regulatory intelligence. It provides tools to collaborate with local distributors, comprehensive tracking and reporting capability, and an application builder that actually gives you templates for each country and enables you to prepare technical files within hours. It's quite cutting edge. So our approach to regulatory is unique and one that gives clients a competitive advantage. If you'd like to learn more or try out the system, we'd be happy to schedule a call to discuss further. Let's get to today's topic. I want to introduce to you our regulatory expert from Korea, Ms. Yujin Ahn. Yujin is a regulatory affairs manager with over 5 years of experience. Through her work, Ms. Ahn has led the regulatory operations for several medical device consulting and manufacturing companies. In her current role, she is responsible for medical device registration process, quality management system, preparing those documentation, and also monitoring new regulations and requirements for foreign manufacturers. Before we begin our discussion this morning, though, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Thank you again for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we'll hold a brief Q&A. We encourage your participation. Please refer to the chat button on your screen. It's at the bottom of your screen. In the interest of time, please submit your questions throughout the course of our talk, and we will try to address as many of your questions as we can. In case we run out of time, please email us your questions and we'll try to address them via email, and we often do that. Also, we'd love to get your feedback on today's webinar and ideas on that you may have for future webinar topics as well. Welcome, Yujin. It's such a delight to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for joining everyone. Today, I wish everyone could get useful information for new IVD Acts of Korea. Okay, let's start.
Thank you. So let's start with the main question. What are the regulatory changes that occurred this year?
In vitro diagnostic device has been separated from the medical device law. Now, medical device and IVDs have separate regulations. The IVD law went into effect May 1st, 2020. And EMAT system has changed as well. EMAT is an electronic portal through which you have to submit both medical device and now IVD application to MFDS. Now there is a separate application for IVDs. The review process remains the same. Only the format of the application has changed for IVDs. And there is also a change in the GMP certificate requirement. Before, there was no GMP certificate required for IVD manufacturers. Now MFDS require the IVD manufacturers go through GMP audit and comply with KGMP, which is equivalent ISO 13485 2016 version. And last one, product classification has also changed. There are some product groups that are now considered IVDs, such as device for sample preparation, clinical chemistry analyzer, device for chemical immunology, device for blood transfusion, device for clinical microbiology, device for molecular diagnostics, device for immunocytohistochemistry, and last one is IVD software.
So a bunch of changes. So I just to summarize, looks like the main changes, there's a new IVD Act. Before this act, medical devices and IVDs were together under the Medical Device Act, but now that's been separated. IVDs have their own regulations now. that actually went into effect on May 1st, 2020. There is an e-MED system. That system is an electronic portal through which you submit your applications in Korea. So they have a special application process for IVDs, as we understand. And now there are GMP certificate requirements, which we'll go into in more detail. But essentially, IVD manufacturers have to get certification for IVDs, a special certification. So they have to certify their IVDs under KGMP certificate. And the equivalent there is the ISO 13485 2016 version. And there are a bunch of products that were part of medical devices are now within the IVD Act, which a lot of us are familiar with. Any devices for sample preparation, chemistry analyzers, blood transfusion, clinical microbiology, IVD software, and such. So that now that's clear. Yujin, can you touch upon how do these new regulations impact device manufacturers? Because they're device manufacturers who manufacture both medical devices and IVDs, and then you have manufacturers that just manufacture IVDs. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Okay. If a company that manufactures both medical device and IVDs, then that company would need to get IVD GMP certificate within 2 years. If the validity period of the medical device GMP exceeds the expiration date of the transitional period, then the exact period is extended from the validity period of IVD. 3 years plus remaining period. Every 3 years. And every 3 years, manufacturers have to get KGMP recertified. If an existing manufacturer of IVDs under the original Medical Device Act still have a valid GMP, then they can wait till their GMP certificate expire before they get certification for IVD GMP. This way, existing manufacturers get more time than the 2 years to get KGMP for IVDs. And if a company that only manufactures medical device prior to the IVD Act, but now intend to manufacture IVDs, they shall apply for permission from the IVD In Vitro Medical Device business license separately. Any new IVD manufacturer must obtain an IVD business license. However, for existing IVD manufacturers do not need to obtain IVD business license. It takes approximately 25 days to obtain this business license. You have to fill out an application through MFDS to apply for this business license.
Thank you for that clarification. And now coming back to the GMP, as we said, I do want to reiterate this, that what we are learning is that IVD manufacturers have 2 years to get their GMP certification. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Yujin, but from what I understand, based on what you've explained, is that if you have if you're an existing manufacturer with MFDS and you already have your medical devices and IVDs approved, especially your IVDs that are already approved, you can wait till the recertification period to apply for KGMP for IVDs, which is nice, so you can buy some time. And every 3 years essentially is when you would recertify. So that's an important note to make. And then the other one is IVD, the business license piece. So any new IVD manufacturer would have to obtain a business license to manufacture IVDs essentially. And it sounds like you mentioned that it takes about close to a month to obtain this business license, and you just essentially have to follow the process through MFDS. Is that correct? Summary?
Yes, right. Yes, right.
Can you highlight, some other changes? I mean, I know we've talked about GMP and the IVD license. Are there any other aspects that can impact foreign manufacturers?
Okay, there is another thing to impact both foreign manufacturers and domestic manufacturers. Clinical performance data for IVD class, especially class 3 and 4, that require clinical data or clinical performance plan shall be prepared and approved by the Clinical Performance Test Review Committee or the IRB. IVDs that contain assay products typically do not require clinical performance data. However, if the device is high risk, then the MFDS may require clinical data. And the existing certified labs are certified for medical device. Since IVDs are now mandates under a separate act, these labs now have to be recertified to test IVD products. MFDS will accept performance testing from existing certified labs before April 30, 2021. After that date, IVD manufacturers must get performance testing done by labs that are certified for IVDs.
Okay, so the other aspect that we need to consider is clinical performance data and the performance testing by certified labs. So this is a point that I'll reiterate because I know Yujin, you and I discussed this a little bit too, and it seems very important. So I want to make sure our attendees don't miss out on this. So clinical performance data will most likely be required in our understanding for 3 and 4. There are some devices now, that's not a hard rule, but overall class 3 and 4 you can expect to get to provide clinical data unless you have products that are assay products. Those typically don't require clinical performance data unless they're considered to be higher risk. So there are definitely a lot of gray there. However, the main point to note is the whole lab situation. So if because everything was included as part of Medical Device Act, and so there were certified labs were performing tests on both devices and IVDs. But now, since IVD has its own regulation and regulatory pathway, in that case, then the MFDS is requiring that these labs also get recertified to essentially cater to IVD manufacturers. So if you are a foreign manufacturer and you have, if you're planning on using test data from existing labs, then you only can do so until April 30, 2021, so next year. If you try to submit data beyond that point, so beyond April 30, 2021, then MFDS will not accept that data. They will require that you get the test data from certified labs that are certified specifically for IVDs. Is that right? It's a bit confusing, so I just want to make sure that we understand that.
Yes, that's correct. Perfect.
Great. So I know we have, again, we're sort of repeating these because it's very important to, highlight the main changes. So I know you talked about some IVDs that require clinical data, but are there additional, groups of products that require, actually, I know we covered the types of products that would be considered under IVDs. Can you talk about what types of IVDs could possibly require clinical data? I know we said 3 and 4, but can you talk a little bit about the types of devices or the categories?
Yes. Under the new IVD Act, here are some examples of the type of IVD that would require clinical data. There are 3 things. First one, a device where the risk sampling from a human body is high. Second one, if the result of clinical performance tests cannot be verified by established medical diagnosis method. or approved or certified in vitro diagnosis device. And third one, most companion medical device.
Okay. So that makes sense. And can you talk about the classification nomenclature of IVDs? Because I know all IVDs are going to be impacted, but what is the nomenclature of IVDs in Korea now?
Okay. IVD classes, it's called in Korea is class 1, 2, 3, and 4. And all IVD classes are affected by this change.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So
Yes.
now that we sort of know what medical device companies, need, we've highlighted the types of changes and the key ones for IVDs. Can you talk a little bit about, in your opinion, and as you're guiding foreign manufacturers through this change, your own clients, what can foreign medical device companies do to prepare for these changes?
Okay, well, I think I already mentioned several things at the previous answers. Medical device who received approval from MFDS are only required to prepare the IVD KGMP audit within 2 years or after their existing KGMP certificate expires. And for existing manufacturers that already have approval certificate for IVDs under the Medical Device Act, they are required to submit the application for their IVD through AMAT, but do not have to go through another technical document review. And new IVD manufacturers have to first obtain the KGMP certificate for their IVDs before they can submit their application through EMAT. You cannot get an IVD approved without a KGMP certificate. And also one what I recommend, if clinical performance data is required, then the manufacturer can use existing certified lab only before April 30, 2021. After April 30, 2021, only certified IVD testing facility can be used for performance test data.
Got it. So again, to reiterate, we are reiterating a lot of the same points, but they're very important. So from what we understand, Yujin, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we, depending on the cycle or the product life cycle that manufacturers are in currently, there are timelines to consider. So if you're a new IVD manufacturer that's going to Korea for the first time, you need to have a KGMP certificate, and without that, you cannot get approval. You can start the application through the EMED process, but one of the steps of that process will be on the electronic portal. They'll ask for KGMP certificate, so you'll need that. So keeping that, and the timeline, it can take several months to get the certificate. So keeping that in mind. For existing manufacturers, what you have to keep in mind is any new IVDs that you submit, or you get approval for now can no longer go through Medical Device Act. It would have to be submitted through IVDs. Clinical performance data, so depending again where you are in the product life cycle, if you already are in the process of obtaining clinical performance data, it's great because you have till April next year essentially to use that data. Anything after that, then you will have to get certified. You can only use certified IVD testing facilities for that data. And then, if you're class 3, 4, you can then, start planning for that clinical data for your IVDs as well. And so a lot of critical things. It sounds like a lot of time consuming things. And then obviously there was a business license piece as well, which is shorter time frame, but the main ones are the KGMP certificate, making sure that you're using the right test labs for your data, because that's where you can waste a lot of funds and then also time. So great. And, we had some questions that came up. And again, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat box. So I'll go through some that came through. One of them was, does the business license and product approval of the business operator handling in vitro devices continue to be valid under the Medical Device Act?
Yes, they can continue to be valid under the Device Act.
As long as they are sort of existing, right? Because the new operator would have to get the IVD. They wouldn't be able to operate under the Medical Device Act, right?
Yes, right.
And also this would be temporary till that KGMP certificate expires.
Yes, right.
Okay. Then another question that came up was, does the company that manufactures medical devices and in vitro diagnostics need to have separate quality managers, so separate QMR?
No, the present quality manager can concurrently perform duties for both medical device and IVD.
Okay. Which items, so this is actually more, it's an interesting question, a valid one. So a client asked about packaging units, so, kits. And so they said, what if you have a bunch of products within a kit? So they cited an example of, let's say, there's a blood glucose meter, as well as the test strips for the blood glucose test strips, all in one package unit. How can one get an approval for that? Because they're two separate products within the kit.
For this case, a product consisting of two or more products in one package can be applied as on one-size-fits. Or medical device and the item name can be applied for the main purpose of the use or the main function.
Okay, so essentially, if you have few products in a kit, you can register it as one medical device as long as you figure out what the main purpose is of the kit as a whole, right? Or the main function of the kit as a whole, and then you would register it under that.
Yes, right.
Great. And last question that had come up was around companion diagnostics. Should companion diagnostics, because companion diagnostics essentially are designed to for medicines and drugs, and they accompany drugs, do you have to register it with the drug? Do you register companion diagnostics separately? How can you register companion diagnostics in Korea?
For the companion diagnostic, it will be approved separately than the drug. You would apply for companion diagnostics through EMAT under the IVD application process.
Okay, so the companion diagnostics essentially fall within the IVD, the new IVD Act.
Yes.
Okay, so Yujin, we have a couple questions that have come up here. So the first question is, if a company is MD SAP ISO 13485, the 2016 version certified, does it still require to pass the KGMP audit?
No, even manufacturers have MDSA or ISO certification. MFSDS still require KGMP certificates.
So so it doesn't matter
Yes,
if you're
it doesn't matter. Yes, yes.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you would still need to go through KGMP audit. Okay.
Yes.
And then the second question that has been addressed is, so the client saying we are currently approved a medical device for our IVF incubator and are now under the new IVD regulations. When does the manufacturing site need IVD certification? So there's a timeline, right? Is it 2 years? So they were under the Medical Device Act, now they're IVD regulations. So when does the manufacturing site need IVD certification? What timeline?
Could you ask me as summarized question again? Sorry.
Yeah. And if you could, Joseph, if you wouldn't mind, if you can provide more information regarding your question, that way I want to make sure I understand it correctly as well. So the client has they have an approved medical device for an IVF incubator and are now under the new IVD regulations. And the question is, when does the manufacturing site need IVD certification?
Okay, for IVD GMP certification, right? Or product certification?
I would imagine this is GMP certification.
For the GMP certification, they can apply right now. However, if they are already approved in Korea, even they still have GMP certification expire dates still left. They after 2020 April 13, they have to get IVD certificate. They have to get KGMP certification. As I say, people pass 2 years.
Okay, so within the next 2 years, they have to get GMP certification. What about product certification? So
For the product certifications, after they can get KGMP certificate for IVD, then they can apply for product certification registration process.
okay, but within that, then they can continue to sell.
Yes, right. It's fine.
Sure, sure. Okay. Thank you. Well, these are all the questions. And Gabrielle, you asked whether we can send a copy of the South Korean regulations for IVDs and for medical devices. Those regulations, the laws would be in Korean, but we'd be happy to send those along to you. And if you need sort of synthesized version of those laws, let us know. RegDesk has that in English. But other than that, if no further questions, then once again, Yujin, I really want to thank you so much for your time today. It was a delight to have you. And to all our attendees and participants, thank you so much for joining our webinar today. And we should be sending out another invite for another webinar at the end of July. We're still working out the logistics. But once again, thank you, everyone. If any questions come up, please do not hesitate to email us at desk@regdesk.co or even priya@regdesk.co.
Okay. So thank you for attending this webinar. I wish the answers for today could help you to understand your IVD law of Korea. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.